Hey everyone, welcome back to the Matt Report. Got a fun episode today with David Hayes of WPShout. He's one of the co-owners over there with his partner Fred, who wasn't able to make the call because he's on his honeymoon. So congratulations, Fred, for that. But we dove into a lot of topics. Going into this, I thought I was interviewing sort of from the angle of what's it like to publish content for WordPress, how are you doing this? You've got a course coming out. They've got a course coming out all about WordPress security, which he'll talk about. So I was going into it from the publisher's angle, but I totally forgot that they actually run their agency too, and they've actually had experience in sort of a traditional startup world before WordPress. So we really got into the meat and potatoes of that, which is a great discussion. So many of us are trying to balance so many things, maybe a day job with a product on the side, or maybe you run an agency and you're trying to get product off the ground. I know I am, so many other people are. It's very difficult to strike that balance, and David and I shared that experience on this call today. We also talked about WordPress marketing, right? And not WordPress marketing, like how do you market WordPress services to customers, but how is WordPress, the greater brand owned by Automatic, going to market themselves? How do they position .com versus a .org offering? Where does Jetpack fit into this messy mix of clashing of brands that we have here, community and pro, and the like? Great discussion that happens towards the end of the podcast, so definitely check that out and listen in. It's mattreport.com, mattreport.com/subscribe to join the mailing list. If you love this show, please go on iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. Season 6, this is like supposed to be season 6. It kind of has some big technical issues with a whole bunch of pre-recording stuff that I had. So I might just keep going off the cuff like this. It's a little bit refreshing to get back into the old way of doing things and just interviewing people as I come along them and I see them in the news or in the Twitter feed, and I say, I would really like to talk to that woman over there or that guy over there and really find out what their story is. And I've been sort of kind of enjoying that because I've been super busy myself. So hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get right into it.
I've been kind of a freelance WordPress and other technology consultant for about 5 years now. So we run an agency called PressUp where we do, everything from small business websites of like we need our first 5-page thing and to more complicated like, we need a system to let us, fulfill orders through our drop shipping companies, like any of that kind of stuff we do. And it really, we've thought of specializing, but we've never gotten into it. And then WPShout has kind of been a hobby for a long time, and it's increasingly my focus. I have a big consulting project that I've had for the last couple of years. It's like an ongoing retainer thing that's wrapping up basically right now. And so, this security course we're going to talk about is my first foray into like, can I actually take this thing that's been a hobby for basically since we bought WPShout in 2013. And make it into my actual paycheck. Well,
we're still working towards it.
Yeah, the results of that test are still out.
One of the things that's going to help you get there is you have a paid course coming up all about WordPress security. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but you mentioned something specifically with the agency side of you wanted to specialize. You really haven't got there yet. Maybe to like looking around at everybody else that specialize, niche down, all this thing. Wow. Yeah. Why haven't you done it? Is it just hasn't happened? Like, is there steps you have to put in place to actually make it happen? Tell me about that.
I mean, so part of it is you've got to pick something that you want to work, a space you want to work in for a while. And the closest we've ever come to an answer to that question was like, well, we like people who are doing good in the world via like charity, non-governmental agency, all that kind of work. But the only thing that actually is a common thread between that generic a terminology is that they don't have as much money as
I was just going to say that.
So it wasn't really the best choice. So we did try that earlier this year and kind of realized after doing it that we were creating very generic content that was no better than what we already were. And there's kind of never been a strong need for us. We get enough leads that come in that are interesting and that'll work out. And, some of them are like, a few $1,000s where they just needed help with a specific feature. And, we're just technical enough to get them over that hurdle, or actually full blown $20,000 to $50,000 projects. And so the mix has always just kind of worked out such that when it comes to like super optimizing processes of the agency, we've never been in a position where it made enough sense to do to be like, we are going to do e-commerce businesses that sell physical goods with a price between $10 and $100. Like, we've just never gotten there,
right?
With respect to wanting to or needing to focus.
I feel like there's so many folks out there. Some folks that are well regarded in the industry. My good friend Brian Castle talks about productizing a service and sort of, just productizing a service is sort of that key phrase that a lot of people toss around. And I just feel that sometimes, that's nice on paper, right? Where you can say for I don't know $1,000 a month, we'll do XYZ for you, and you as the person creating this thing, you're trying to like box in your client to say, for $1,000 a month, we're going to only operate between these lines, and we're not going to go agency model. We're going to do custom. But I feel like every customer ultimately just comes to you and says, hey, can you do this for me too? Can you also link up my Facebook and promote these posts for me too? And you're like, no, not really, but I'll pay you like $5,000 a month. And you're just like, oh, okay, I'll do it. And then you start muddying the waters. I just feel it's so hard to get into that funnel of customers at this level.
Absolutely. I think you make a great point, which is that like, because of, kind of like a lot of people who are doing WordPress aren't, the $10 million a year company that like has this app that is the core of their business, and they need a lot of help with it. So it's a lot of people in a lot of different positions, and the likelihood that you can isolate like, oh, we just work with, Fortune 500 companies doing marketing. Like, there's a very small set of people who could possibly service that in the WordPress space. And so I think a lot of people end up, especially, it's the curse of someone new to the whole industry, but they want to try everything and they think they can do everything. And I think, certainly for us, we, when we first put up a site and we're like, we're going to do agency work, we're just going to like help people with websites. We offered services we don't offer anymore. We were like, we do SEO and we do paid placement, and like none of that was our strength or our interest, or, social media is another obvious example of something that we just can't do. So, we do, I guess, to some extent, we've niched into like, we basically do development. If you need a designer, we have people we've worked with before who we think are good, but that's not our thing. So we have niched in that way. I just like, as far as industry niching, we definitely haven't. Yeah. And I think kind of what you're saying, and I kind of agree with, is that I'm not sure that it's as doable in WordPress as it is in other possible technologies or ways of looking at the industry. It's pretty easy to be generic and just be like, we only do, like I said, e-commerce companies that sell goods between $10 and $100 of price point. Like, you could offer a technology solution for them, but they're going to be on such different stacks and stuff. So if you do WordPress as well, that's also a niche.
A lot of other agencies, myself included, we have products, we have themes, we have plugins. You have a WordPress content site, right, where you're putting out tutorials, news, information, interviews, that kind of thing, email newsletter that goes out. That to me is a product. How do you split your time? How do you manage that? How do you keep it going when you're getting the paychecks from the customers and, oh boy, we have to do another tutorial or PDF?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, one of the things that's made that not actually an issue is that I am maniacally able to execute on a task that I've given myself or someone else has given me. And I will do it to the exclusion of other things. So I think a lot of people engage in these things as like, oh, it would be nice if I published on my blog more. And we've always, me specifically, have always engaged with WPShout as like, no, every Tuesday we publish something. And I know Brian Krogsgaard, when I talk to him, is always like in awe of how much we always just like get every Tuesday. But I mean, the downside of my maniacal ability to keep executing a thing that I decided I would execute is that, you can do it for a long time without having a clear sense of where the payoff comes from. I've got a friend right now who, makes, I think he's at 3 YouTube videos a week. and he's growing his subscriber count and all of those things, but he doesn't have a vision about where money comes in from it and where it lets him quit his job. And I think that kind of ability to execute is really good, but you have to balance it with kind of a balancing with other priorities, such as how do I actually pay my bills. So for us, like, this site has suffered a small amount on like massive client projects are due on Friday, but that focus has been, kind of in between the entire time. So it's never been the case that we've forgotten it entirely or left it entirely absent of like, oh, we need to come back to executing every Tuesday. There's a new newsletter and a new article.
Right.
Yeah, so, I mean, mostly it's been like just that default mode for me.
Yeah. Well, everybody else, close your ears because we're not as maniacal as David is. One of the things that is everybody rolls their eyes, right? You hear this advice all the time is you got to set your goals. You got to look at your passion, and then you're like, nah, man, I'm just going to do the work. I'm going to start publishing because that's what I like to do. And then you go, oh shit, I didn't set a goal, which is I am both hands in the air right now, like totally guilty of that, especially on this site, Matt Report. Is I never really even tried to push anybody to my own products through my website, which is hilarious, right? Other than just talking about it on the air here, I don't really funnel anybody anywhere or retarget or even think about monetization, maybe aside from sponsorships, but that was about it. And you're right, you just start chugging along. And my God, YouTube is just a whole other league. Like I've been doing videos, and it's just like the podcast is a lot of work. The YouTube channel is just insane amount of work, and I don't know how people keep up with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's one of those things where, especially because a lot of people in the WordPress space and in, I'd say, tech in general are like hobbyists who happen to find out that they could make a living doing
yes, great.
the stuff they love. It leads to more so than in other spaces. Like, affiliate marketing is not anyone ever wanted to do in their free time, I don't think. So those people are a little better, I think, than most people who, are developers or start out as developers or came from kind of like that web, the whole web sphere. Like that web sphere is just like hobbyists who are like, isn't it neat that I can like make this thing? And then later we think about like, oh, like I've been putting a lot of time into this. I wonder if it's going to pay off or when. And people get lucky. Like I think some of the YouTube stars are like people who just happened into it and suddenly they were like, oh, I am making thousands of dollars a month on YouTube. But I don't think that happens for most people. Right. For most of us, it's like you need to be strategic. You need to think about, what are your goals and how are you taking steps to achieve them? Absolutely.
So let's just riff on that a little bit. You mentioned that a lot of people in this space might be hobbyists, or they're just sort of, they're just like stumbling upon success for a little bit, and then it's sort of domino effect after that. Do you think that's a detriment to maybe the WordPress market, or I won't say it's like community to like, as everybody knows community, but let me just take a step back and stage it for you. There's like this sense of, for the last year, maybe people aren't as interested in WordPress anymore. Agencies might be tightening their belt a little bit more. Product sales are certainly different. We just saw my friend Scott Bollinger talk about that on Post Status. Is that because there's just so many of us that riding the wave when the wave is big and going up and to the right, that people are like, yeah, this is great, we're going to make a whole bunch of money, but we're all just like trying to figure out where to go afterwards. We really don't know how to sustain this market because we're all learning to a degree. Is there just a massive pool of, I guess I'll say it, is there just a massive pool of amateurs in this space? I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean in like young amateur, couple years under their belt running a business, and this is what happens?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think to some extent it's true. I think there's also like, there are people who have been, maniacally able to do the business. Syed Bulky, I came across a product the other day and I was like, oh, that's him. Yep. And it's just like, there are the exceptions. I think a lot of people are, kind of following the lead of the few people who've made it work. And I would say that Syed is an example. And, for a while there was there was a crop of people who were desperate to like make their new theme framework and sell it to everyone because of the success of Genesis. I think there is an extent to which the ecosystem is a little like hard up for really innovative marketing and customer serving ideas, because it is so easy to create the stuff, and people round the creation of a theme or plugin or something down to zero, and then are like, oh, I'll take care of like that's what their passion leads them to, and then they're like, I'll try to figure out how to market it later. So there are a lot of ideas that come out of like the desire to have a theme company, rather than from the idea that there was this need in the market that didn't have anything serving it, and so I want to go in and serve that need. I think that's a big part of it. And this is not, I don't think this is especially true in WordPress. I talk to people kind of from all over who have the basic idea that they want to have a business, but don't think about what the customers of that business will be. And that works out pretty well, and it makes you have very nice dreams about the business you'll have someday. But when you get into doing it, I think it often surprises people. I certainly was surprised the first time I set out to have a business and didn't think about the customers, and then realized there were no customers because I didn't make sure I found them before I created a thing.
And what business was this?
So Fred and I started working together. We'd actually gone to high school together. We started working together on a startup called Medivate. And the best analogy I've got is that it's kind of like something like Strava or Runkeeper, but for meditating. So if you know those things, basically the idea is like you can track your workouts and you can get insights about like how quick you were and all that stuff. Meditation is much harder to quantify, which hurt it. And, the basic idea was that there are, like, we had this latent desire to help people meditate more and have a better time when they do it. But, we didn't figure out what those people were actually looking for, or if they were looking for anything to solve their problem. And we also just, some of just like the simple, straightforward, obvious stuff of marketing, of like telling people that it exists, we weren't great at doing either. But kind of the compound failure of that meant we spent about 2 years building, a PHP website app thing. It was like respectable. It was not good, but it was respectable, and it did its job. And just, we maxed out at probably like 100 active users on a given weekly basis, just because no one was finding it and no one wanted it when we had created it. And it's actually still online. You can go check it out, but it's not like a business that's worth us investing any time into these days.
Is this pre like iPhone and pre just mobile market blowing up?
I would say the App Store had probably been around for a year or two actually, but I didn't have any expert. I kind of knew PHP, and so we made what we knew how to make rather than what the market needed.
Got it.
And the thing that's like doing what we did but way better is an app for Android and iOS called Insight Timer. And it's basically the same thing where it knew what people wanted, which was they were looking in app stores for meditation timers, and built the rest of the features onto the back end of that because people were already there. And we were trying to give people that thing that like Insight Timers built to over the last 5 or so years, by giving them something they didn't know they needed or have any reason to want.
Aha, I get it. Yeah, that is listen, years ago, I can't even count how many years ago it was now, but I had a co-founder on a startup that I had, and we were creating Dropbox before Dropbox existed, and this is before this is at like the boom of broadband and cable access. So internet speeds weren't even where they're at today. It wasn't even you didn't even think that you'd have this kind of connectivity that we have now. And sometimes we can, like, I think your app now, especially in the boom of Tim Ferriss and meditation and how do all these, entrepreneurs start their days. Like, I think that, and everything is so data driven, I think maybe a couple years later, you would have been talking to me right now on a yacht somewhere off the coast of Hawaii. I don't know. You probably would have done much better with that one.
Well, watching the space, I doubt that would have happened. But I do think there are a couple things. Another thing that started around the time we did that has taken off, and people will have casually heard of it even if they don't know much about meditation, is Headspace.
Right.
And again, that was an app that, that was an idea, a company that started with the same basic goal, but gave people something that was much more approachable and close to what they were already looking for, which is like, I want guided meditation. I want to know how to do it. And we specifically were like, we will not do that. And it turns out if you give people what they don't want, they typically don't want what you give them.
Right. I'm fascinated by the start of somebody, right? And specifically celebrities, comedians, music artists, maybe even if you go real extreme, like talk show hosts, maybe like a John Oliver, a Dr. Dre, Kevin Hart, the three that come to my mind, where, if you looked at their work 5 years ago, I mean, I guess John Oliver still dresses up in like donkey suits every now and again, but you'd see him as like this, this little bit on Jon Stewart's show or even prior to that, wherever he was before that. You see like these weird things. You're like, what is this guy doing? Like, this is just a joke, right? Kevin Hart, like you see him, and even Dr. Dre, you go from sort of this just rap figure to this just business mogul who sells his business to Apple, right? The most profound company in the history of the world. You just see the start of people. I'm just so intrigued that so many people start something and they give up, or they take these lessons, or they take these failures as not a lesson, right? They don't learn from it. They don't invest in what they have. A lot of the time, if you have the wrong product, if you have the wrong product market fit, you might still have an audience. Even though you don't have the right product market fit, there might be a pivot in there, to overuse that word. There might be a pivot in there to extend the life of your business, extend the life of your audience. Have you had any experience with that? Maybe even stuff you're doing with WPShout and the agency business, where you're like, you know what, this doesn't feel right. I'm going to shift the gears a little bit here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of this is a slant fit, but one of the things we tried early on in WPShout's life was that we were going to sell advertising in a boutique way. Like, the way we would actually make it profitable would be that rather than trying to sell things to our audience, we would sell access to our audience to other people. And our audience has never been huge. I mean, I think we get probably about 50,000 visits a month right now. And, a few years ago, that was probably half that. And that's when we were trying to sell it. So, on a pure CPM basis, there's not a living in just being like, yeah, we'll run AdSense and you can buy that space for 10 cents per click. So what we tried to do was sell it one-off, and it just didn't work because we weren't, neither Fred nor I are natural sales people at all. Like, we're pretty much the opposite of that. And that, like, we started a business that failed just because we sucked at marketing, and then we had this same idea of, we'll sell to like hosting companies, $6,000 a year annual access to our audience, and we'll like create content to, basically kind of native advertising, or however you want to phrase it, of like, we'll review your product because you're paying us. And that idea, I think, fundamentally didn't work, because our audience, part of the thing our audience likes about us is that we aren't just another one of the thousands of affiliate marketing blogs in the WordPress space, where I'm gonna make a percentage on me selling you this plugin or that theme company's subscription. So it was kind of a slant fit for us, and it just ended up being wrong, which is part of the reason. So we released Up and Running, which is basically a beginner's guide to WordPress, similar pricing as this, 2 years ago, and then we kind of iterated on it, and we brought back in Alex to help with the thing we suck at, which is the marketing. Alex basically created WPShout when he was like 16 or something, went away to university, and that's when we bought the site from him. And then he happened to be graduating university and unsure what to do. And we were like, hey, you seem to have been really good at marketing, and we aren't. And so there's been a really like nice fit where Alex kind of helps us be a little more strategic about all our marketing moves, and he's helping us launch products. So the hope is that this is a business, but as I said, the jury's still out on that one.
So let's talk about it. Give us a rundown of this latest product that you have coming out. Who's it for, price point, and when is it going to be available? Sure.
So the product is basically, the issue is that I feel like a lot of people are worried about WordPress security. 4.8.3 came out yesterday, basically with a security issue involved. And I think if you weren't an insider, you may have missed the entire thing, which is great because it caused me unnecessary heartache over the weekend because I really respect both sides of that transaction, where there's this guy who's really big in the broader PHP community who created like the way that PHP is now the best language for passing, basically securely storing passwords. Like, he's done a lot of good stuff, and then the WordPress security team, which is like, tired of dealing with egos of reporters, people who report security issues, and I think the combination just led to a giant conflagration. And like, as an outsider, especially if you don't understand the heart of WordPress security and what the issues are, that's just like a very scary thing to pay attention to. So the idea of the course is that, this is a scary topic that a lot of people are, kind of uncertain about. And the hope is that, it'll help you deal with that. It's actually called WordPress Security with Confidence because I think fundamentally the thing is you can install a security plugin, but you only trust it as far as you trust its developer. And the hope is that by taking this course, you actually trust that your security process is as secure as it can be because you have new knowledge about what security means and what it doesn't mean than you might get anywhere else. So there's basically a user, non-developer, site owner tier whose name I think is still a little bit of undecided, but there's a tier for people who basically don't know what PHP is, have never heard of SQL injection or anything like that. And I think for those people, we've got a really attractive package that covers everything from like, what do the various WordPress security plugins do and why should you use them? Which ones should you use? Can you use them together? What can I do without a security plugin? What does it mean to keep WordPress secure? It answers kind of all of those questions that I think a lot of people have, which is that they've vaguely heard from someone, who's like their uncle's best friend was like, yeah, I heard about that WordPress thing. It gets hacked a lot. For anything from that to people who are like truly developers and know that cross-site scripting is a thing, have some sense that they're supposed to like clean data before they show it because that might prevent it maybe, but don't really have a clear sense of like, well, no, I sanitize the value and then I escape it before I output it, and therefore I'm safe from cross-site scripting. So the hope is that we move people along that trajectory. And so the user tier right now is going to launch at $149, and then the developer tier is going to be at $197, I think. Maybe the user tier is $147 because we like sevens because they're cooler. But same basic price point of around $150 and around $300.
Is that an Alex Denning strategy?
I think that was actually my idea. I heard it on a podcast. Someone was like, no, I mean, man, sevens are better. I tested it. I did A/B tests on all of it. Don't end with a 9.
That's great.
You're throwing money away.
Awesome. So where does this go? And I want to. This is a big question. Like, and when I say where does this go, I mean like, where does this go for you as WPShout's owner? Like, is this the way that folks, at least for the next year or so, should be looking at monetizing content? Is it through sort of finding that niche audience member and then trying to address it with a product fit with them instead of going through advertising and sponsorships and things like that? And you're going to release more classes as we move forward?
Yeah, that's a host of things. So yeah. I mean, physically where someone could find this is we're creating a separate WordPress site called courses.wpshout.com where you will basically be able to buy this and other courses. That's the core idea. From a more tactical and practical perspective, I think, our audience should definitely be on the lookout for this kind of thing. Fred and I are talking about doing a site speed thing. I think Git is a promising topic. I think there's a lot of stuff where there isn't a lot of approachable education on a topic that clearly says what you know before you do it and what you know after it. And so I'm still learning how to teach better. That's a lifelong process, but I think I've kind of gotten a good sense of where most people are on these sorts of topics. And so really my goal for the next year is to try this out and see if it works. I will not recommend to anyone else that they do this because I don't even know if it works for me.
Got it.
I think our up and running has been, a good success for us, especially after the relaunch where we had some help from Alex. It's been a success for us, but as far as whether this would work for anyone else or anyone else's audience, I really couldn't begin to speculate on that because it's so different. I think that, there are definitely WordPress sites that, should be continuing to do affiliate marketing. There are WordPress sites that should, be continuing to try to actually create a new security plugin that solves some of the needs that the existing ones don't, or, gives people the confidence in the whole process of what is WordPress and why is it now secure that I've installed that I don't think the existing ones do a great job at. But I think, it's so specific because, I really admire everything that Brian Krogsgaard has done at Post Status, but I don't think anyone should follow that model who isn't Brian Krogsgaard and, has the specific talents that Brian does, to attract a crowd and get them interested and energized and inform them. There's that balance of those four things or something that Brian has that I don't have. That's why my solution is closer to trying to inform rather than entertain, because I think Brian's a slightly more engaging speaker than I am.
Geez, now we're really making his head big. Let's move on.
All right,
from the
Brian Krogsgaard, I don't know. He hit a puppy once.
Yeah, he definitely did.
Let's make it bad, but not too bad.
Yeah, many puppies from my reportings. I would say that the Matt Report's a little bit more entertaining than the Post Status Draft, but we'll leave that for another discussion. No, Brian's a good guy. So no, that's great. I'm glad that you're open to admit, because I feel like so few people are. Maybe they're admitting it to themselves, just not out in public. But that this is a test run, right? This is a test run, and this is another experiment. It's the way that I've always done things. People ask me all the time, like, "Boy, you do a lot." Yeah, I do a lot because one, I haven't hit that home run yet that I can just
right.
that I haven't focused on, right? That's like if people don't see that, that's not obvious, right? But still, even if you do hit a home run, I don't know. I don't know what happens when you hit a home run, because I feel like I will continue to experiment with things because it's just the only way I know how to operate. Some things are a strikeout. The other things is just a base hit. Some things are a double, and I'll take them as they come. But the ones that eventually sort of die out, I just stop doing, and I move on to the next thing. I'm not afraid to move on to the next thing and say that I'm working on something new. With the underlining foundation is everything's WordPress, so it's not like I'm splitting my attention between like a WordPress product and let's say, I don't know, a Drupal product, or like just an info book or something like that. On that same vein, how are you getting influence, or where do you look for influence outside of the WordPress space? I think that's really big now, where people are like, hey, I guess we should be looking outwards now instead of just inwards. Where does that come for you?
Just to clarify, the question is like, where do I learn?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think it certainly is the case that I've spent a lot of time in WordPress, and I love it dearly. I've been using it for 10 years now, and no one will as quickly tell you that WordPress is terrible and defend it than I will. And part of that is because, like, from a development perspective, I think it's absolutely essential to be outside the WordPress community, because I think WordPress, is, a very old piece of software, and it has some really good ideas in it. It also has some really bad ones. And if you learn in WordPress, as I actually did, learn PHP development from it, you can build pretty terrible applications the second you step outside of WordPress. And that's because WordPress has more than a few quirks that are not great. So I've been, in the last couple of years, I've been paying a lot of attention to the broader PHP community, speaking at PHP conferences and all that stuff. And, the mix of things you hear out there is really interesting. Domain-driven design is a big thing for PHP developers now, and it's more so there than any other programming ecosystem. And it's basically, thinking harder about what your app is supposed to do and thinking about your design of your app around what it's supposed to do rather than what kind of classes or code you want to write for it. Business-wise, I definitely, I've loved the Matt Report and Post Status as a way to stay abreast of WordPress news for as long as they've existed. But, I would not only want to listen to them. I love Startups for the Rest of Us. I think Rob and Mike, thank you, do a great job of just distilling various different pieces of information. And they also both have very interesting and different stories, for example, where Rob had the runaway success of Drip after iterating through 10 different types of products. And I feel kind of to wrap around to what you were saying, there is sort of this thing where people who happen to get a home run the first time they step up to the plate are like, well, you know what it was? It was that I got up early, or that I happened to eat peanut butter and jelly that day. There's sort of this way that people who find success, or success in anything easily, don't understand as well as people who learned it the hard way, how they got there. And they think it's down to, their great big ego or whatever it was that they happened to grab a hold of as their most important trait, and they say that launched them into success. And I think the most interesting people to hear from are absolutely the people who are still trying things and saying well, this isn't working, but this is. A couple other names that are coming to mind are the A16Z podcast. I'm not really into venture capital. Andreessen Horowitz is what A16Z is an abbreviation for. And it's a fascinating podcast about everything from cryptocurrency to the latest iPhone and whether or not it'll succeed. And then the other name that I'm thinking of is Stratechery. I don't know if you know Ben Thompson, but he's basically the most interesting theorist about the various different giant companies that are dominating the current digital ecosystem. So why is Facebook and Amazon's business model different? What does that tell us about the world we live in today? So those are just a couple names, and I definitely think, like I said, I love the Matt Report, but I also agree with you that inside the WordPress ecosystem, there is a sort of echo chamber where, what Matt Mullenweg said 4 years ago is still going to be reverberating inside of the WordPress community, where outside of it never really made an impact. So I think definitely being aware of that distinction is super useful in understanding the broader world.
And this will be sort of the final wrap-up question, and this is the big one, man. This is the one we talked about. This is the curveball. You can pass if you want, but another thing on my mind, since you brought up Mullenweg, is WordPress, the brand, its marketing efforts, or maybe even lack thereof. I remember at this previous WordCamp, US WordCamp, there was going to be this big push and then sort of a marketing team, and then I think a few months later I got this email hey, there's going to be this marketing push, and I think, this is just rough numbers, it's been 6 to 8 months since I've really heard anything on the marketing front. And meanwhile, every video that I go to on YouTube, I'm getting hit by celebrities endorsing Wix, YouTube celebrities endorsing Squarespace. Again, Kevin Hart, famous comedian, he's endorsing Wix. It was a commercial on the Super Bowl last year. They're using YouTube celebrities for Squarespace. And, I might be a little, full of myself, but I'm just man, we've got all these players in the WordPress space that really push WordPress. We have podcasts. We have publishing sites like yours and Krogsgard and countless others. why isn't WordPress marketing, maybe reaching out to us? Like, hey, you influence a whole bunch of people collectively. You've got some real strong thoughts on WordPress. How should we work better with the community side of things versus the automatic side of things? I don't know. I mean, for a guy who's like re-exploring marketing on your own site, I mean, what do you think the WordPress brand or the Automatic's flavor of WordPress's brand should be doing to bridge that gap, commercial versus community side?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. I'm just having a total scattershot number of thoughts that I'll just start elaborating. I think one of the really interesting things is that the WordPress.com and WordPress.org distinction exists for us inside of the WordPress community, but is basically meaningless to anyone else, because WordPress is basically, it still remains a developer tool. It's a site builder tool or something. It's a tool that makes it easier to make a website. This is WordPress.org. It's not a tool that gets you a website. You have to still go buy from HostGator or SiteGround or whoever it is this hosting package, and then you're like, I wanted WordPress, and they're like, oh, here's our installer, go run this, and then you'll have WordPress. And I just think that's a very disjointed experience for people. And then once they get in, as someone who taught a very frustrated middle-aged woman WordPress a few weeks ago, a lot of people still struggle with the idea of how to pilot WordPress. And I think this is really, to my mind, where, the Wix and Squarespace and so on that you're mentioning as the threat to WordPress comes in. And it's because that they in offering and owning the entire experience can do a better job at giving people, learn our conventions, and then everything you do on your website will be subject to these conventions. WordPress fundamentally still does not offer that. If you go and install Ninja Forms, and then you get your theme from, some ThemeForest seller, and you get, an e-commerce system from Automatic itself in WooCommerce, you're getting 3 different visions of what WordPress interfaces should look like, how those all blend together is what is this short code thing? It's still pretty disjointed. And I think part of the reason that, to my mind, the positive reason that Matt has stepped back into the WordPress core lead development, I'm serious about being the BDFL of this community role, is because that fracturization of the WordPress community is really one of its biggest obstacles, both for WordPress.com and competing with Squarespace, and for people who want people to not be in Squarespace, but to be on WordPress sites out in the world in, A2 hosting or whatever it is. Because it's just such, the core thing of that WordPress.org tool just doesn't make sense to an average human. In my long time trying to explain it to them, they're just oh, okay. They vaguely understand that there's this thing called a website, and they vaguely understand that maybe it runs on a server. But the idea of no, you have to buy hosting, which is part of a server, and then you put this other thing on it, and then that's WordPress, and that's what you use, and it's great. It just doesn't compute for people far outside of the industry. So when I think about Super Bowl ads, I think I'm not sure how Squarespace is doing its accounting, and I'm not sure, maybe these are actually a runaway success, and maybe they aren't. I think part of the reason that I've certainly heard WordPress.com advertised much more aggressively in the spaces where I've heard Squarespace advertised historically, on podcasts and so on, in the last few months. And I think it's because fundamentally, Matt and Automatic, as the business that best represents WordPress, are feeling that pinch from the Squarespaces and Wixes of the world marketing harder and polishing their product into a state that maybe feels better for some new visitors, or offering themes that look more attractive to them, or whatever it is that's driving that end user decision. I'm not in the front lines of that decision, so I don't know what WordPress needs to really compete with those people. I do think Gutenberg is a step in the right direction, giving people a more intuitive, less short codey experience, less oh yeah, this is just the text box that you do everything in. Oh, you don't know HTML? maybe there's a short code for it. Like that answer has never been very satisfying. For anyone but developers who are like, short codes, oh wow, this is really cool. I can have a function in PHP and it just makes some HTML inside my post. Like there's a like wow factor of the tech of that, but there's not an intuitive like good design factor that makes it where like an average consumer gets WordPress and it's like, dang, now I got a website.
Right.
And I think people have that experience, and like the marketing of Squarespace presents that story all the time of like, dang, I just spent an hour and had a great website. And like that is not most people's experience installing the WordPress.org product on wherever they end up landing, to buy the hosting from, I don't think.
Yeah.
So,
it's one of the tweets from Matt late September of this year was, if WP only appeals to technical folks, how do you explain the growth? To which I responded with, I believe, consultants ? Because and then shortly thereafter I sent out an email, which I'm going to be publishing pretty soon, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. This episode goes out, where I polled the folks on my email list, and I'm certainly not representative of all of the consultants and businesses in the WordPress space.
Right.
But 30 or 40 or so people that responded with their feedback. I mean, out of those 30 or 40 folks that responded, I mean, I asked for the site count. How many websites have you launched for folks? WordPress websites have you launched for folks over the years? And I'm waiting to tally up these numbers with the data, but thousands, right, for these 30 to 40 people. Which blows away the ratio of 1-to-1, right? If you have a non-technical person signing up and they're just launching one site. So it's just, for me, I feel like, and we will wrap it up here because the jetpack conversation will only take me to the next level. But I feel like it's very insular, and it's just like, we're at a crossroads where I feel like if Mullenweg is steering the direction of the product, and we're really not talking to people who are implementing WordPress for other people, right? I'm not talking like the 10ups of the world and the folks that are building big apps, and even the team that I work with at Pagely, like these big infrastructure sites. I'm talking about like the woman that you mentioned before, the countless small businesses that I talk to in my local community, trying to get them like a nonprofit on a website. I'm talking about that kind of scenario. I think we have a lot of good data that we can provide. They don't need to go and hire a Kevin Hart, right? They can tell stories of WordPress and the success of WordPress through stories that you have, stories that Carrie Dills has, stories from me, and sort of leverage that. And, that's me saying like, hey, look at us kind of thing. But man, I just feel like we're doing a lot of work for WordPress and for the brand of WordPress, and there's no love coming back in this direction. And then, of course, Jetpack is just going to take us all out. So what the hell? I won't wrap you up into that conversation unless you want to get into it. But
I'd be curious to have it, but maybe not on this one. I will say though that one thing that one attention I do want to highlight is like, imagine that Ruby on Rails had a Super Bowl ad. You'd be like, that's crazy. That's incongruous. And like, that is kind of where WordPress sits, is like, it's halfway between these two things. Like, it is a thing that like a small business should probably get a WordPress site, because then they totally own their entire infrastructure. But a lot of small businesses don't have that technical know-how in-house to actually understand like, oh, I have to run updates. Oh, updates are important for this reason, including security, to tie back around. Like the responsibility of a WordPress site, a WordPress.org site, deploying the wild is pretty big compared to like, I am a 1 to 5 person company. And I think Fred, who comes in on Tuesdays for our clerical work, can like probably do that, but I'm not really sure. Like, that is a big burden that companies have, I think, given us the feedback over and over that like, that is a lot for like a 1 to 10 person company. And that's fundamentally the thing that I think Squarespace and so on is competing better in. You can buy WordPress hosting these days, but it's still like, I need hosting and I need WordPress. And that still is like it's smoother, but it's not smooth. Like, if WP Engine were to compete with Squarespace, that would be a really interesting idea, where they they are WP Engine. What's WordPress? Not us.
Right.
We're WP Engine.
Exactly.
Because they could actually compete in a way of like, come here. We're a little more expensive than Squarespace, but you can take your site anywhere when you're done. Like, that's a really interesting proposition. But I think fundamentally, like, without that like managed hosting thing, people are just overwhelmed by the idea of, not only do I have to like figure out how to pilot this interface I don't get, but I have to do with this other stuff you're saying, or else it'll go down or, be hacked or whatever. So it's just a lot for an average site owner to just take on board. And that's, I think, the reason for the need for the simplification that, to a certain extent, all the releases this year, and I think Gutenberg more than anything else is hoping to bring. Whether or not it brings it is a whole other conversation that, again, we could have at a later time, but probably it's too big for this one.
Yeah.
But, that basic thing of like, I think there is some vision where Matt has recognized like why Squarespace is winning is that simplicity of like, I go here and I get a website. And WordPress.com more than anything else needs to compete with that. As you said, like the consultants who build 30 websites, 100 websites in WordPress for people over the years, like they don't need to compete with Squarespace because people have found the limits of Squarespace and are opting out of that into like custom WordPress sites. It's fundamentally like, if you're trying to market to end users, you've got to give them a single thing that they can buy, which Squarespace is, and WordPress outside of .com definitely isn't.
David Hayes, when is this course going to launch? Where can folks find it one more time? What's the date? What's the price? Go ahead and send it out there and we'll close the show.
Sure. Yeah, so the product is called WordPress Security with Confidence. As I said, there's both a user and a developer tier. And for $147 or $297, I believe. Got both sevens this time. And it's going to be out on November 6th. If it's after November 6th, you can just go to courses.wpshout.com, and that probably won't be the landing page for this product, but that will get you to exactly where you can buy this product. So
awesome stuff. MattReport.com, MattReport.com/subscribe. Join the mailing list. It's #1 way to stay connected. We'll see you in the next episode. Hey, everybody. Thanks for sticking around and listening to this episode and supporting the Matt Report for over 5 years now. It's been a pleasure of mine. It was a pleasure to have this guest on today to talk about their business and how they run it. Speaking of business, if you have something you're launching, you have a new website, a new marketing page, a new product, anything that could use a second set of eyes, you can find me at userfeedbackvideos.com. That's userfeedbackvideos.com, where I will review your product, your landing page, your funnel, whatever workflow or starting point you want me to take a look at online. I'll do that. I'll record it. I'll send it to you in a private screencast with my feedback from over a decade of experience in this space, marketing, technology, WordPress, and otherwise. I hope to see you there. It's userfeedbackvideos.com. It's like having a co-founder for $59.